Hello and welcome to this first podcast or webcast in the academic session 2011-2012 for the History and Context of Journalism course at the University of Winchester. This year we're improving these podcasts. We have a studio ready, but it's not quite ready yet, so we're slightly camped out. Joining me today is Brian Thornton, who a little earlier this afternoon gave a lecture on the subject of political philosophy. I'm also joined by Gable and Karen Purnell, two students who are producing this podcast and a series of podcasts this year as part of their final year project. So I'm going to kick off by asking Brian, who gave a lecture today on classical political philosophy, but also touched upon modern political philosophy in the personality of Machiavelli, just to describe in pretty general terms what the lecture was about.
The scope of the lecture was pretty large. I began with the discussion of the social contract. The social contract is central to any discussion of political philosophy, although it's not much discussed now, but it is something that is essential to political philosophy generally. The way that I started the lecture, and I think a useful way to start the podcast, is to discuss Plato's Crytal, which is one of the key dialogues written by Plato. The reason I chose this is because it really frames the debate of the social contract, a debate which is picked up later by Hobbes and by Locke and by Rousseau. In the dialogue, the situation is Socrates is in prison. He's facing a death sentence, and his friend Crytal comes to try and persuade him to escape. He uses numerous arguments to try and persuade Socrates to escape, but Socrates, being this incredibly effective debater, and he's very, very comfortable with arguments, and he slowly dissects Crytal's numerous pleas and dismisses them. And then he comes to a point which is critical to the debate of the situation of a citizen inside a state, about debates about law, about our obligation to follow the law. Socrates comes up with this argument which he believes is the last word on why he must follow the law and ultimately give up his life. And his reason is that he owes it to the city of Athens. He owes it to the laws. And in the dialogue, Plato comes up with this very interesting innovation to have the laws actually speak for themselves. The laws are embodied, personified in the dialogue. And the laws say that if Socrates tries to escape or does escape, he is attempting to destroy Athens. I mean, this is an incredibly dramatic statement and an incredibly dramatic claim. But what Plato, via Socrates, is trying to argue is that if one person, especially somebody of the notoriety of Socrates, chooses to disobey the laws, chooses to disrespect the laws, he is bringing the whole structure of the state into question, because people may look to him as an example. In a Kantian way, the question needs to be raised then, if Socrates does this, why can't everybody do this? Why should anybody follow the law? And the argument that Socrates makes is that he lived, was raised, was educated, enjoyed a fantastically successful and fruitful life in Athens. He enjoyed all the benefits that come with being part of a civilization, a civilized society. And he owes the society respect, he owes the laws obedience. So he thinks that if his disobedience has the potential to destroy this society that he loves.
I think that contract theory is widely known to people, whether it's been taught or not. It's just the general... You can hear politicians today saying, well, people have rights, but they realise with rights come responsibility. So the contract idea is very, very common. But what's less common, and this is something that was interesting you pointed out in a lecture, is that contract is implicit just by the act of living in a civilised society. You don't have to sign a contract. So when people say, well, what's society ever done for me? They've never really given me anything. I can't get into college now because of the fees. My housing is very poor. So Socrates would be saying in the Cryto, yeah, but wait a minute. What about the fact that public health has been established, that there are roads, that that society is a good in its own right? Is that right? Is that sort of what is being said here?
I think it's something that we really don't consider now, because we are used to being surrounded by society. We are used to being surrounded by services. We drive on the roads. We turn on our tap and water comes out. We exist in this society, and we sort of take it for granted in a lot of ways. And Socrates is saying, and Plato is saying, that this is wrong. Because we enjoy our lives in this society, we implicitly owe a debt of gratitude to the society.
The other thing I found very interesting about the lecture was Plato's book, The Republic, and the idea that there are different types of people, that not everybody has the same kind of nature. And in the idea of justice, as to one should obey the law, there are actually different obligations depending on the type of person you are. And I think that Plato speaks, doesn't he, of golden people and silver people and bronze people, of people some people are governed by reason, other people are governed by passion, other people by aggression and spirit. And that therefore the common idea of justice now is everybody has to be, particularly after Immanuel Kant, who you mentioned, everybody is the same. Everybody has to be treated in the same way to establish justice. But Plato wasn't saying that. You seem to be saying in the lecture, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a useful way to think about this is the famous analogy of the chariot that Plato uses, is that the soul, as Plato described it, is divided into three parts. You have reason, you have spirit, and you have desire. And if you imagine a charioteer, the charioteer is reason. He is the one holding the reins, trying to keep these two horses under control. The horses represent spirit and desire. And as the soul is divided into three parts, and so argues Plato, is the state. There is potentially three types of state, Plato would say, and these states are states that are dominated by people who maybe are fully under the sway of reason or desire or spirit. So he would say that a society that is dominated by people, spirit people, would be very militaristic, very aggressive, warlike. People who are dominated by desire, this state would be, Plato describes it as a type of democracy. So democracy is something that tries to respond to the myriad needs that comes with desire. We all desire different things, and the only way to answer this is through democracy. But Plato says that a democracy will always be subservient to money, because money is what we need to answer to get satisfaction for our needs, for our desires. So ultimately, a democracy is not the ideal state, according to Plato. The ideal state is described in great detail by Plato, is one dominated and run and ruled by people who are fully rational, fully dominated by reason. And these are philosophers, because only philosophers are capable of creating laws that are perfect, that have the potential to be perfect, and they are the natural rulers. I think the thing that you were describing, Chris, is an idea that people have a place, people have a function, and people are born into that function. People and only in a perfect society will these people find their natural place.